Now I'm very excited to bring back an amazing and experienced sports bettor and longtime friend of the show, and Mr. Ron A. Sports from the Inside Blitz. You can follow Ron on Twitter at Ron A. Sports. Ron, Super Bowl time. Here we are. How you feeling about it?
Well, it always marks, these 2 weeks always mark kind of downtime for me in a way. It's the end of the season, one more game. We don't have 60 games in a week. And Kiev, it's great to talk football with you as always.
Yes, you too, man. I love bouncing ideas off you. Always make it a must to have you on 2 or 3 times a year. Now that the college is gone, we can forget about that for a little while, but we love getting into that early of the season. So we'll be texting about college football, I'm sure, probably by May or earlier. It's always fun. We love college football too, but now it's Super Bowl time and it's prop time. And you're very experienced in the props. You love it just like I do. And it's great to have you on to talk about, man. But before we get into it, I always like to ask what you've learned from the season. And I ask myself that. And any mistakes that you think is curable, or is it random variance? Anything you want to think about next season, or maybe some do's or don'ts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as far as my regular betting portfolio, and because I'm not a teaser guy, and I've done some things that I'll discuss with parlays that I never did before, but my straight betting portfolio, it hasn't changed. And I didn't learn anything different. I still go with the three main handicapping methods that I use, set my own power ratings, know how to adjust them, look at situational matchups, strength versus strength, strength versus weakness, line of scrimmage, pass defense, and so on. I still rely on the X's and O's as a big part of my handicapping. And then those situational factors, not just who you play, but when you play them. Off unusual rest, like Kansas City had that 6-week stretch where were at a rest differential disadvantage, 6 straight weeks it wore on them. They got the week 18 reset and they're a different team. So I look for those three methods. That hasn't changed. What has changed a little bit is how I attack props because of DraftKings and FanDuel. They come out so early now. The market's set by Wednesday or Thursday. I've had to adjust there. I used to do just props on Saturdays and Sundays. It's almost too late to do that. So I have to reset that. And a couple other things. A lot of coordinator changes. I'm going to be talking about that in the off season. Let's see, Kyle Shanahan, he's the offensive coordinator and the head coach of San Francisco. Every other offensive coordinator has been changed around or flipped around in the last 24 months, except for him. So you mentioned May as far as, starting to work on the 2025 season. It's almost has to be earlier as we try to do a deep dive into what scheme changes and what all these new coaches are getting into and all that. One more thing I'd like to mention, kind of long-winded, but one thing I did learn this year is that the number of coaches that are willing to go for it, 4th and 7, 4th and 5, from the 45-yard line, from the 40-yard line, from the 38-yard line, we have to adjust how we look at key numbers 1 and 2. We have to look at how we adjust how many punts there's going to be in the game, how scoring is affected, what coaches are going to go for it. Yeah. We're seeing a lot of strategy changes as analytics, and this past year has been a reminder that you can't just go off the same things that you've been doing year after year. You have to adjust with the times if you're a handicapper.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff. So that's great stuff.
I know.
I mean, and I think that you're right on many of that stuff, many of those things. I think I wasn't quick enough to make the adjustment of the creative part of the handicaps. I have always been super metric-y, right? I've always had my own algorithm and power ratings, things like that. And they failed me a lot. Now, I had a great season, mostly because of prop bets. I probably was down on totals and up on sides, and that kind of washed. And I was probably a little up without that. And the teasers were really good, and I kind of faded off. But the props is what really was my bread and butter this last year. But I think the reason I screwed up with my metrics is not that my metrics were wrong. They were really close to the lines in most of the games, if not dead on. I think that just the game changed. And I think it's more of a public type, I guess, novice. It favors the novice bettors a little bit more in the reason that they don't have to do, they can say, well, this team lost and they're tired, or this team won, they're tired, or this team is in a terrible spot. I feel that motivation trumps my metrics more. And I'll give you an example. Let's pretend we had a 5-game season of anything, but we're talking football, a 5-game season. You are going to use your metrics and not even care about motivation. That won't even factor in at all. If somebody's, you think somebody's tired, you think a team's trying to save their coach and things like that. If you add games to a season, like the NFL did recently, and add a playoff team, adding the wild card, it lessens the regular season. And the NFL now becomes a little bit more like baseball or the NBA. And I learned that because, well, I've lost some plays on it. Like, for example, Denver, when they played the Raiders at the end, there's no metric in the world that would say that said the Raiders were going to lose to Denver, much less barely win. Well, the teaser leg and the Broncos didn't even come through. The Raiders beat the crap out of them because they're trying to save it for their coach. They're trying to make Pierce their next coach. And even though I believe Sean Payton tried to have his guys up for the game because he's a good coach, that was important. Another one was the Green Bay Packers. You know, everyone was hating on LaFleur. He's a much better coach, and I shouldn't have fell into that trap that he was kind of losing his luster. He won a lot of games at the end trying to get those Packers into the playoffs and did an amazing job. And dang, they were so close to advancing past the Niners, as you saw. You know, that was a big motivational change and a great change for them. And you could have thrown away all the past metrics. Even though I tried to predict that in the Packers earlier, I lost the bet and just kind of got off them, but it finally came through and gelled for them. So going on past metrics is, I think, going to be a little bit weaker for me. Don't get me wrong, because there's still going to be plenty of games where, like, this team is going to want to win. This team's going to want to win. There's nothing there holding them back. I will probably rely heavily on metrics. But when it comes to the spots more, lack of rest, bunch of wins in a row, teams a little bit beat up, they're not going to give it their all like an NBA team would. They're not going to give it all like a Major League Baseball team would be losing to Oakland. And I have to remember that, Ron.
Yeah, those are good points. And for me, it was kind of a tale of the last 2 years, 20. And I've had some really good straight up years, the last two, really 60% kind of, which is above what expectation, because you can never expect that. But 2022 started off so fast because they had these games that were revenge games. There were all these kinds of things going on early. And this past year, even though I ended up hitting over 60%, I started 5-8 in the first 3 weeks. And I didn't quite get a handle. And part of it is, you mentioned a 5-game season versus 16, 17, 18 games, and so on. The first 4 weeks, we're still relying, at least I'm still relying on what I know from this team from the previous year. But after 4 weeks, when I turn over the data and I look and say, forget it, Philadelphia is not the same team. We can't, you have to turn your back on, we're waiting for Philadelphia to win by margin. Well, maybe they're not going to win by margin because they are who they are in 2023. And then you mentioned Green Bay. And Green Bay is a good example of a team that's really, really young. I mean, they barely have wide receivers and tight ends that are eligible to drink in a lot of states. I mean, we're talking about guys that are, first and second year guys. They didn't have a wide receiver or tight end on their roster that I think had more than 1 year of experience. So naturally, the more reps they get, the better they're going to gel at the end of the season. So you don't want to give up on a team. You just want to look for continued progress. So that's kind of how I look at it. Each season can be a little bit different, but you have to wait 4 weeks of data before you really can get rid of last year's data and say, wait a second, let's cut the cord, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to do that. But I've noticed the last few years have kind of been trending towards a lot of the creative handicaps. And I'm going to try to remember that. But here's the problem. It's still hard to predict motivation. You're not going to be right all the time. You're not, I'm noticing a lot of, contest winners and things like that have been great. And I'm not saying that they're not doing metrics. I'm sure they are. But in my opinion, I have to kind of remember this coming into the year. And you know what? It only is going to get worse because you're going to see an 18th game in the NFL and only 2 preseason games. And it's because of the money. And they want something I heard today. They want President's Day after the Super Bowl, which is the following week in February, which would mean people would get off for it. So it almost makes Super Bowl Sunday that much better. I think the NFL, I think I heard that at VSiN, so I want to make sure I credit that. It might have been, I don't want to, steal their thunder. It was the morning show on VSiN, but follow the money. That's what it was. I think that I'm going to be more careful next year when it comes to that. Now, I will say in the beginning of the season, you're not going to have your metrics perfect, but you still should have an advantage if you did your homework properly. That's
absolutely
always important. That's always important.
I mean, I'm doing for college. It's different because I'm handicapping every game twice, and it's done by August 15th. But I can't really start until July. With the NFL, once the schedule releases out in May, I have all the information I need, and it would take me literally just 5 minutes to make adjustments between May 20th and August 20th. If somebody has a June 1st deadline cut, or if somebody tears an Achilles at some particular point or whatever. But there's not much that we need to know, at least in my opinion, between May 20th and August 20th. But I want to be prepared for May 20th because season wins come out, and I think I could have a jump. And we saw Arizona's season win total go from 5.5 to 4.5. You had to jump in early on that if you liked Arizona under.
Do you know how many swings happened on that last field goal of people Seattle over and Arizona under?
I mean, it was crazy, but if you had under 5.5, you didn't have to worry about it for Arizona.
If you're smart enough to get it early. And I've done well.
But that's the thing. There are 2 kind of places where you want to make your season win bets. And I know we're getting off track. And one is to have as much information at your disposal in April and May. And the other is to be prepared to pivot as you see what's going on with training camp rosters and at least the 1 or 2 exhibition games where you get an idea of how the new coaches are scheming and whether or not there are going to be coordinator changes means scheme changes. And I have to account for that. It affects how they're going to get to the quarterback, what pass coverage they're going to play, lots of variables.
I'm glad you said pivot because I want to bring up another example, the Eagles. The Eagles were injured somewhat at the last game and into the Tampa Bay, but they're road favorites at Tampa Bay. It's not like the sharp money took it down to 0. It didn't. They're still road favorites by 2.5 or 3. They got their doors blown off. And, the people certainly that won that bet patted themselves on the back. But why are we not adjusting them quicker? It's like, why did it take so long? I mean, they just beat Buffalo. They beat Kansas City last year. Why did it take so long for those offensive coordinators like Gannon, to finally show that this team is forgetting how to play football in a way? Mm-hmm. And they still, everyone said they're deep because they've always had so many draft picks. I mean, they kept drafting guys from Georgia, but so they should have been able to weather a few injuries. But I believe it was the coordinator loss that finally bit them, Ron. Is that fair? I mean, but it's like, why were we so scared of them and not bet Tampa Bay and not? It's almost like they lost momentum. They looked like they got worse as a football team at the end.
Yeah, this is something Chris and I brought up kind of halfway through the season, saying that we need to start downgrading Philadelphia. And I think we were not early, but we were earlier than a lot of people in terms of downgrading them. And I think a lot of people, including myself, were saying, what are we missing with Tampa Bay Philadelphia because Tampa Bay graded out as a dead even team with Philadelphia with a slight home field advantage at that particular time. 3 points seemed like a gift at that point. There's tape on Jalen Hurts. I think that was part of the issue. If we want to backtrack what happened to Philadelphia, there's more tape on Jalen Hurts and how to defend him. I don't think he was 100% healthy during the year. That's another thing that's going on. They didn't quite fix their secondary to my satisfaction, would be another thing that's happening. And they had a first place schedule compared to what they had had in the past. So the quality of opponent, especially considering the NFC East had a cakewalk schedule in 2022, all of the NFC East had a little bit tougher out of conference opponents. And Philadelphia had that extra first place opponent, 17th game. So if you combine all of that in retrospect, that was the handicap.
Yes, you're right. They had the extra first place opponent from the AFC. Yeah. That and well, the season wore on them, but it's still Jalen Hurts. It's still Devontae Smith. It's still, I thought AJ Brown played that game, that playoff game. Maybe he didn't, but still, I mean, they were still loaded. Goddard was back. Goddard was gone for a lot of the season. He was back.
Correct.
It's like you still had the talent there, and they didn't show injury, but I mean, I think that they just lost their way from their offensive coordinator. And when you're out of practice, kind of like when baseball, I notice even with my son, it's like he's great, and then he takes like 5 days off, and it's like, dude, it's like, have you ever played baseball before? It's like it's like you have to just keep going with that, what you know. I mean, players get worse by having poor coaches and switches, and you've seen it all the time in the NFL. And I'm going to be a little bit more wary to that. But yeah, we beat this to death. Let's move on to the next one. So you just moved, didn't you? Yeah, you used to have your friends over for the Super Bowl. What are you doing for your Super Bowl experience this year?
Oh boy, it's going to be quiet. I guess I'm going to be on Twitter X a lot and tweeting every play or whatever, trying to get on a live show or something like that. It's going to be quiet. We're used to having anywhere from 5 to 12 or 15 people. In the younger days, we used to go to a place, a big group of ours, and we used to go to, some of these places where the atmosphere was really big with the Super Bowl and the drinks and the sandwiches were flowing. So I always had big crowds of some sort for a Super Bowl. And it's my wife and I in Temecula at our new home, which we love, but it's going to be quiet for the Super Bowl.
Going to be quiet. Well, Ron, maybe you have to put some crowd noise in the background or something, or find some quick friends that knock on a neighbor's door or something like that. But the truth is, you don't need it. You'll be on Twitter. You'll be having a good time watching the game. And it's funny, if Twitter does anything good, it feels like you're not alone, I guess, so a lot of times, you're tweeting back, you're talking to people are commenting. So that's always nice. It's always kind of taken the fact that you need companionship for these games. And personally, as I do every year, I'm going to go to my buddies, or he'll go over here. We're going to take the TV outside. We'll have one family over, or our family go to his house, and that's it. And then we can concentrate on the games and look at all my props. I print out all my props on my sheet and have a great time with it. And I think that's what it's eat delicious food. That's what it's all about to me, and that's what I'm doing. But for folks that might be newer to Super Bowl betting, can you tell us some of the do's and don'ts for betting this big game, Ron?
Yeah, so these are important. This is a Super Bowl. It's the big game, but it doesn't have to be your biggest wager. I mean, I've been through all of these really since I was single digits when my dad hooked up the screen to get that first Super Bowl illegally on the roof or something like that. And we were watching the AFC and the NFC for the first time. It doesn't have to be your biggest wager. I've had, I think, 4 really big wagers in the Super Bowl over, 45, 50 Super Bowls that I've wagered on. So what's that? Once a decade, I'll have a big wager, and I'm not going to have one this year. And sometimes I don't have a wager on the straight game. So don't make it your biggest wager because of that. Props are everywhere, and I tend to have 60, 70, 80 props or whatever, but I don't recommend it for the newer people. Have fun with it. And if you start punching that button, in your home computer, your laptop or whatever, make sure you track what you have. All of a sudden you may say, wait a second, I bet this guy and I have 3 units on a prop when I should be having a half a unit on a prop. Be careful of how it adds up. Make sure you track things. Even if you're newer, you probably have more than one book. Hopefully you have more than one outlet. Shop for the best price because it matters. In the long run, if you're taking bad lines 7 or 8 times, it's like losing a full play, losing a play and a half. So definitely shop for your lines. And here's an interesting one that I would end on is don't be afraid to go against the norm, to go against the grain. Everybody says this guy is going to be good and everybody's piling on. Purdy, I'll give you an example. Purdy, under 31 and a half, under 32 and a half attempts, has been steamed by professional people all over the place. I mean, now you're lucky to get 30 and a half at equal juice or so on. If you really have a conviction that either San Francisco is going to have to play from behind or that they're going to open up the offense or they're going to use the short pass to do things, don't be afraid to pivot if you think that that's a good number. You're going to get a good price on it. Be a contrarian at times.
Yeah, absolutely. You might think so much of your play, but then you miss an opportunity to middle it or to protect it because it's football. Variance, injuries happen, playing from behind happens all the time. Couple of fumbles, kickoff fumble, your team's on their backs. Anything can happen. So any positive EV, you should at least, I think, buy back for half. So that's great stuff. I also want to add, don't bet these props when they don't have nose to them, or at least certain odds on the nose, because you know that these things are massively inflated. And also some books are sneaking by massively juiced lines. I just saw one and I'm going to go pull it up here, but there's stuff that's wrong. Like you see, like, for example, over 70 yards receiving might be minus 115, and then over 71 yards might be plus 105. And then you look and the over 63 and a half is like minus 300 or something. Well, it's not 300. It should be like minus 180, minus 200, in that situation.
Right.
So they try to sneak some of that stuff by as well. So if it doesn't have a no, question it. Why does this not have a no? Probably not really the true odds, and you're betting in negative VV, Ron. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. And you're seeing more shops kind of expand the juice a lot. We've seen some changes in the prop markets, and I hate that because instead of the 115, which is normal for props, you're getting 125 on one side plus 125 minus 178. And those index props that you mentioned, they're not very good. Matt Landis, who makes a very good point about that, trying to get just yes-no props. Circa's very good about putting out just the yes-no props. I would stick to those. I think that's good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you check that out. These are, like, I'm looking on Bet Online, minus 120 on both sides for 49ers total rushing attempts, but these are cross sport and political props too. So they don't know how to price them. So they juice them real bad. I just think there's too much variance for you to predict some of this stuff. So keep that in mind. You want to do predictable stuff, but also I always every year set us a little money aside to have some fun. So I'm going to go over some of that as well on this show, a couple of fun bets that I made. So moving on, who do you like in the Super Bowl, Ron? Is there a side or total worth betting, or one you took already?
Yeah, it's tight. And I think, and I put this article up at Wager Talk, so you could see a couple of my articles, part 1 and part 2, where I get into the nuts and bolts. So I won't necessarily get in the nuts and bolts in terms of here. You could read about that. I'm going to go back to kind of my old handicapping methods for this. The game has changed a little, so it's not that 19. I think it was 19 out of 20 with the kind of metrics that we see here, favored one side or another, and it hit 19 out of 20 times. Last 5-6 years has been 3 and 3 because the game has changed, and partly the game has changed because the NFL wants it to change. Fewer penalties, more offense, harder. You can't tackle below the waist, you can't tackle above the waist, you can't touch a quarterback. There are a lot of different things that change the metrics, but I'm leaning. I understand McCaffrey can change this game completely. He's an unbelievable player, and Deebo Samuel adds a kind of variable to the game where he could do so many things. But I think Kansas City has a better pass defense, and that's what I'm going to rely on. The fact that if push comes to shove on these third down conversions, I'll trust Mahomes against the San Francisco defense more than I would trust Purdy, who I like, and the system is good for him. But the Kansas City pass defense is in my opinion, just better, especially in the medium to long range. And so that's why I favor Kansas City in a small one-star play.
Okay. All right. So you like the Chiefs. All right. Well, I'm on the Niners. I took them when it went down. It actually went a little farther. I took a -120, and then it got to -112 and stuff like that in a few books. But then I took an alt line as well at -2 at +110. I think that my thoughts are this. It's such an interesting handicap because you can check boxes, and you probably go Kansas City with check boxes, coach, quarterback, blah, blah, blah. Defensive coach, especially. And then you go with pure power Niners, 0.8 net yards per play advantage over the Chiefs, right? Also the what have you done for me lately stuff. But I question the what have you done for me lately? And here's why. The Dolphins were an absolute mess at the end of the regular season. You saw that. I mean, we knew they were losing that game. One of my biggest bets of the playoffs was the Chiefs in that game. You know, I knew that the Dolphins had no chance. And the reason is they also lost 5 linebackers. You know, I mean, when you lose 5 linebackers, Joe Blow could have been on their practice squad and played in the NFL playoff game.
There were 10 reasons to like Kansas City. I think you're being soft on how much that game was a mismatch.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I mean, it was just ugly for these Dolphins here, losing their last 2 games at Baltimore, bad, getting blown out, and then to Buffalo at home. It's this team was done. And so that was easy. Now you go to Buffalo. And Buffalo, remember that Matt Milano loss early in the season? Oh, my God, that was bad. Oh, geez. Well, finally, towards the end of the season, Bernard started playing their next Mike linebacker. Then he got injured for this game. And once he went out, this team was completely devastated with injuries. And then you have the boneheaded play calling by McDermott. And then you have the easy. Well, I wouldn't say easy. It's not easy, but Diggs missed a pass that he catches. He missed a deep pass that he catches. That should have kept him in the game. And to be honest with you, I was on Kansas City that game too. I took Kansas City +3. That I thought that, it was Buffalo. Now, I did lose on the Ravens. So I went 2-1 on Kansas City in the playoffs. Hopefully it's not.
So did I.
Now, I haven't seen a game plan that bad, but it was also bad planning on the defense because the Reed does what he does. He marched down the field, and he did it a couple times against this D, but still, you can't get away from that run game, and including Lamar. Have him run the ball up the 2-hole, 4-hole around the edge, read options, stuff like that. They didn't even think to do that, and they said to go against guys like Snead on their secondary and make Lamar pass. Well, not only was Lamar off that game, but he looked completely clueless. He fumbles the ball in the beginning, right? That turned into a Kansas City score. And then in the second half, everyone's still thinking they should run the ball, but the Chiefs are like, you know what? Let's just stack the box. Lamar's off. Spagnuolo said that. So I believe that they were more right to not necessarily run the ball with 8 guys in the box, but that should have made it easy on Lamar with those one-on-one man-man coverages, and he should have hit his receivers. But he was throwing 5-10 yards past them. He looked like not even a novice quarterback. So they not only stacked the box, but then he figured out and hit some plays and went downfield. Bad luck with the Trey Flowers thing, the 2 boneheaded mistakes, the fumble, and obviously the penalty. There's some non-calls in that game, but then thrown into triple coverage. Even though you could say that there was a little PI on that, it didn't matter. That was a stupid move. Yeah, it was a terrible. It's like you throw in you move all the way down there, down 7, just to throw into triple cover. They should have been leading at that point. Kansas City couldn't score in the second half. And so I'm like thinking that this Ravens team probably played the same game that they did against the Colts earlier in the season when they lost that game. So I truly believe that Kansas City had a very easy way, and the Niners just happened to catch a red hot Packer team that they had to grit their way back against the LaFleur, who is in the Kyle Shanahan tree, so knows everything about him. And then the Lions team that just punched him in the mouth with great offensive plays. And I will say Steve Wilks is a liability for the Niners. He is no D'Amico Ryans. He is not a good defensive guy, but you still have talent on that defense. So I'm still going by the pure power. I think the Niners do win it, but I just find it so interesting, Ron, on how creative this handicap is. I almost think that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I'm into this stuff. It's the
Yeah,
nerdy
I mean, you
handicap.
can make a case. You can make a case for both teams. Certainly, there's a path for San Francisco winning. They could jam the ball down Kansas City's throat. I think Kansas City is going to open it up a little bit more than people think. So we'll see if I'm right or wrong. I think Kansas City is going to try to test the secondary deep. And games are usually won or lost by 3 to 5 plays. The punt block that almost was, or the punt block that happened, the deep pass where it falls off the receiver's hand or he catches it. I think they will test San Francisco deep with Scantling. We'll see what happens there. You can make a case for both teams. I'm a little worried because one thing I didn't see happen with San Francisco, I wouldn't have foreseen it, is that they could be run on so much by Green Bay. Jones with 100+ yards, and then run on again the next week with the Lions, who have a diverse offense. I understand that, but it's a little concerning to me that San Francisco's entire round 1 draft choices on the defensive line didn't stop the run like they used to. You mentioned Wilkes. A year ago, they were 3.5 per carry allowed, first and second best with Tennessee in the league at 2022. But last year, they were more middle of the pack.
Yeah, that's true. Hargrave's there though. I think that Pacheco is more of a run up the middle guy, and you still have Fred Warner there. If they're smart, they run it at Chase Young, who there's all these kind of rumors swinging about him not playing. I don't believe that. I think he's going to play, and I think that he knows now that everybody's hating on him for the run too. But I think you got to run Pacheco out the outside, and that's where you're going to really gash the Niners. Interesting official in Vinovich. He doesn't really call a lot of holding plays, so I think that benefits the Chiefs, especially with Mahomes back there. I'd rather have Mahomes in a clean pocket than Purdy. But I will say that Purdy's EPA ranking number 1 and Mahomes are number 9 throughout the season. Purdy looked better. I personally think that's a lot of scheme, but that's just what makes this handicap so interesting. It's just amazing to see how these teams match up, yet the Chiefs are the Chiefs. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a great game, and I'm excited to watch it.
Hopefully very good game. And yeah, I think you're going to have as many people like the Chiefs as like the 49ers. And there's a reason for both. That's why don't bet your bankroll on it.
Don't get me wrong. If the Niners did what they did to the Chiefs last time, jump them, or Atlanta to the Patriots, I'm pretty sure I'll be buying back in the game on the Chiefs.
I think Shanahan will be running the ball a little bit more in the fourth quarter, and then maybe Purdy does go under in those circumstances. And there's a path for Purdy under for certainly for attempts. But 2 minutes left in the first half. Whichever team has the ball, that's going to spike the pass attempts.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start out with some novelty props then. You don't really dive into the anthem much, do you? Unless you actually get the information. Anything novelty, halftime, anything?
I don't know why I pulled the trigger, but I did. Luckily, I was limited to $5 or $10, but I did put in a little play. Andy Reid would be shown before Kyle Shanahan. And I don't know really why I did that. It's just Andy Reid is a more visible person compared to Shanahan. But I don't know where the cameras are going to roll for that one. Sometimes somebody will give me some information because I go with a couple of other people and we share props during the season. Sometimes they give me some music information or color of Gatorade information or junk like that, and I'll put a few dollars on it. But you're right, that's not something I really want to spend a lot of time on.
Yeah, I know. Well, first of all, I let my wife have at it on the Taylor Swift part. I just let her have my screen, and they were only limiting $10 to $25. So I just said, look, do whatever the hell you want on my account. And she went off on a few funny ones. Like I think Reba's got to wear a black or brown hat at like plus 600 to plus 400 or something. And I think that there's a first song in there, and who she's sitting by, who is like some random I've never even heard of. I don't know these actors and actresses like I did when I was younger. But hey, you know what? I want her involved. I want her okay with my, you never want to upset your significant other, because you might be spending a little time on sports betting, right? You got to get them involved a little bit, Ron. So that's my theory on that. But no, I bet the Gatorade because I do every year, and it's just my fun, and it's probably negative EV. I don't care. I bet purple again because Kansas City had purple last year, and if they're superstitious, why the heck would they not do it again? I think that brings in the purple Gatorade. And I like orange because I believe it's the best tasting Gatorade. I've had people vehemently disagree with that. I actually do like taste purple too. That's probably my second, but orange is the best taste, and it's the original one that I liked since a kid. So thinking Chiefs are kind of orangish. They're red too. I know Taylor Swift with the red lipstick, but red Gatorade's not good. I don't know why people think red Gatorade's good. It's not. Yeah. It reminds me of Mountain Dew Code Red a little bit. Nah, not for me.
I tried Gatorade, I think, once or twice, and that was once or twice too many.
Yeah, no reason to put any more calories in this body. Let's talk about some game props then, my man. How about any beginning of the game props? So I'll just tell you the one that I do every year, and you probably heard me say it before. Okay. First score field goal. I always do it, and it wins more often than not. Matter of fact, I can't even remember the last time it lost. I think it's been like 4 or 5 years. Maybe I'm 4 for 5 the last 5. I have to go check. But you got 3 plus 75 on the Chiefs and plus 385 on the Niners. Blended odds. That's plus 190 because it still has to be a field goal or not. So you're playing double, so you have to divide it again. So your blended odds are plus 190, and I think that the reason I bet it is because it's a Super Bowl. These teams tighten up. They don't want to throw that pick in the end zone. They're not going to be as loose with the ball. It's the beginning. I think if Purdy gets the ball, he could be a little bit timid. And I have another play piggybacked into that. I truly believe the Chiefs score first. I bet the Chiefs score first at minus 106 for a star on FanDuel. I think that it's just perfect. I think Purdy, even if he gets the ball first, he's a little nervous, doesn't quite work out. They kick it. The Chiefs get down to kick a field goal. You do have the better, more trustable in Butker, even though he wasn't good last year. He was good this year. So I do bet the Chiefs to score first at minus 106. And I took just a little bit for a third of a bet. Chiefs to score first and lose, plus 340. I point 3 stars. So it kind of ties into my Niners.
Yeah, in a tight game, the lead can change hands a few times. So no guarantee that the team that scores first wins. So there's sometimes value on that. For a lot of last year and for most of the last 3 years, the 49ers have been exceptional at scripting their first 15, 20 plays, going down and scoring. So I would have probably had a differing viewpoint on that, saying that the 49ers would be the first to score because they seem so efficient in putting that first drive together, especially when they're at full strength. Now, I'm going to guess that Deebo Samuel's at 90% and that George Kittle's at 85, 90% and McCaffrey about the same. They're not quite 100%, but they've had a week off. So there's really no excuses with all that. So I would probably lean that way, but I don't think at the present time that I have any early, will this happen or will this happen early, which is unusual for me, but I don't think I have anything right now.
Yeah. It's an interesting start. I always love the field goal. So even if that wins, I'm going to be in the clear anyway for my score first. If it happens to be Moody kicking the field goal, so be it. But I'm okay with giving up the score first, but plus 190 blended odds. Let's move on to the next, and it's really the first score TD. Do you do any first score TDs? Now, I will warn people, these are probably negative EV bets in general. They're not going to set it up any different. So I think this is a little bit of a less serious bet for me. but I've done well in the Super Bowls in the past. But it also kind of blends onto how I see the game going. Did you do any TD bets in general or first score TDs, Ron?
I didn't do any first score TDs. We talked about yes, no props, and these are not kind of yes, no props. So it is probably negative EV. Pizza money that Scantling has a long gainer / touchdown in him at 6-1 or more.
You said you were avoiding Scantling to me last week.
I was avoiding Scantling. Yeah,
I fell for it too. I got one on him as well. We were both like, last play of the game
funny.
goes over.
It's funny because I'm using him both ways because I'm using him as hedges with other people. So I think he could get a long gainer, but I also think that he could have no reception in the game. So I would lose the long gainer, but I would win the no reception. So I'm kind of all over the place with some of these guys, using them as buffers for other things. Noah Gray, because I'm kind of big on Noah Gray, and I know, it's been out there that Ron likes Noah Gray. It's been mentioned by other people that I have Noah Gray. So a little bit on Noah Gray. I think he's plus 700. There are index props.
To score a touchdown in general?
In general.
Okay. Because I got a good one too. So
yeah, I think one other thing I would make is that I'm more inclined, especially with the total being so quote unquote low at 47 and a half, that there aren't going to be more than 5 touchdown scores in the game or 6. So as we get the recreational money in at the last 2 hours before the Super Bowl, in a yes, no, will somebody score a TD? I will probably have 2 or 3 players know they won't score a TD, and I'll probably get some decent odds on that because the yes will be bet a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to wait and hit some unders, and that's because I believe the game is going to be run heavy. I don't believe a pass heavy game. I'm thinking this is going to be a rushing heavy game, and that's why I took the first half under 23.5. Now, that feeds into my thoughts on the maybe negative EV first TD props, but I do it every year for the Super Bowl. Why not? I have Christian McCaffrey plus 400 for, like, let's just say a half unit. Isaiah Pacheco, a half unit on that. It's actually lower, but I'm just going to call it because I divided it up like that because I have, I think, a total of 2. And then I have Deebo Samuel plus 900 for a quarter unit. Patrick Mahomes plus 2,200 for a quarter unit. Brock Purdy plus 3,000 for a quarter unit. And Kyle Juszczyk, actually, he can run, but he's probably going to be a quarter unit. Now, I would love Kyle to do it because I have him anytime touchdown at 10-1 for a third of unit. So I'm not counting that as the first TD, but I believe that because he's caught last game. If you look at the last Super Bowl, he has 3 receptions. He has a touchdown. He's that sneaky guy that's open. And that's what they're going to need if they're going to beat the Chiefs. It's you can't go against the guys going against the corners all the time, Deebo and Ayuk. You got to find the sneaky guy open, and that's Juszczyk. And that also leads into the biggest. I'll give you a little bit. My biggest bet, but my thought is that all these guys can rush it. Purdy's been rushing better. Mahomes rushes. I actually hit a Mahomes rushing in his first Super Bowl, and I think it was against the Niners here, the first one he won. It was 30-1, and I had a larger bet on him. But I think he's regressed a little bit, but I still have to include him. But any of these hit, including McCaffrey, I still win. But McCaffrey's odds for me is only like plus 100. I only get because I have to minus out everything I won. So it's only you have to realize that since you're making other bets, you're going to lose them. So of all these things, all blended odds, I'm probably negative, but I don't care. I think that I'm going for Purdy. I'm going for Juszczyk and maybe Mahomes, but I'll be fine if it's Christian McCaffrey or Pacheco. And hey, McCaffrey and Pacheco can catch the ball as well. So that's my thoughts. But going into the rushing props, I'm going to give you my largest play that I have. And that's actually, no, this is a receiving prop. I also bet Kyle Juszczyk over 3.5 receiving yards. 8 out of his 10 games, 8 out of the 11 games he's played because he was injured, he's had more than that. And he's not a screenplay receiver. So when he catches a ball, he's already past 5-10 yards. So it's more like median thought than average. You can't look at his zeros and think, okay, this should bring this number down. The truth is that when he does make a catch, it's never under 4 yards. So I believe that he is going to go over 3.5 receiving yards. And I put a 1.5 stars on it. And that was probably my largest bet with Juszczyk, Ron.
Okay. There were a couple things that you mentioned. I think there's a good teaching moment in there. A lot of your TD props, for example, are geared towards somebody running it in as opposed to getting in via the pass. And I think that bodes well with correlating other stuff. If you have stuff like, if you believe that Purdy will not throw a lot of touchdowns, if he doesn't throw a lot of touchdowns, then you have to believe that his receivers are not going to get into the end zone. So that correlation I really like. The Juszczyk one is difficult for me because they could throw him a 1-yard pass or a 2-yard pass or a 3-yard pass. So I'd probably rather lay the juice on half a reception, which is
it is higher
minus
juice.
150.
It was minus 150 on that, but I don't think he's had a reception under that this year.
Yeah.
And he just that's not his route. They'd rather shoot it to Deebo Samuel on the side if he's going to catch one at the line of scrimmage. So that's just
true. I think both Juszczyk are going to hit. I'm not guaranteeing it because they tipped their hand with Juszczyk a little bit last week, so Kansas City's going to be aware of it. But I think either one, I could make a recommendation on either one of those. I went different with rushing props because I don't have too many. I think when you talk about McCaffrey and you talk about Pacheco, if both teams had their way, they're going to go over the total. But I also think books know how to properly price both of those guys. So you're not necessarily getting any value for them. I mean, people have been, projecting McCaffrey week after week all season and Pacheco the same. So I don't see any particular value in that. I'm going against the grain on one prop and maybe with the grain on another. I have Purdy small play Purdy under 12.5 rushing yards. I just think he'll be more inclined to be in the pocket. I know one big rush can beat me, but that's where I'm going on that one. But for the game, I'm saying there's going to be more than 1.5 rushing TDs. A little bit of juice in that, and it's moved up. But I think there'll be more than 1.5 rushing TDs.
I agree with you because I also think both teams have a rushing TD, whether it's Mahomes, Pacheco, possibly Hardman. Is it Hardwell or Hardman? I believe it's Hardman. I keep forgetting that. Like literally the last 3 years. I think both teams have a rushing TD, and I bet plus 130 on that. So I got plus money on that. So I like that one. Number of players for Kansas City to record a rush is over 3.5. So I can almost be certain that Mahomes, Pacheco, and probably CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is going to have one. So I just need one more guy. Well, this is the Super Bowl. You see Kelsey take rushing yards before. You've seen offensive linemen do it. You've seen some of their backups do it. I think that Hardman's going to get an end around. And it's probably because Deebo's going to get a bunch of them. But the number for the Niners was 4.5 and plus money. I can only guarantee Deebo 2 running backs and their quarterback, maybe Brock, would get those. So I couldn't go over 4.5 for plus money. I wanted to. If it was 4, I would have. But it was 4.5, so I couldn't find it. But I do like the Chiefs on that side. And I had to lay minus 188, Ron, but I'm pretty sure about it. I mean, I'm not sure about anything, right? But I feel good. I looked at the past Super Bowl histories, and they've always had more than 4 rushers.
Yeah, I think San Francisco under 4.5 would probably be the way to look, and that would be juiced.
That would be juiced for sure. Unless they do something really nuts. Or they're winning by 30 points and their third string gets a carry.
Yeah.
That still probably won't happen. All right, so I took CMC over 90.5 rushing yards at minus 110. I just bet this thinking it was going to go up anyway. I still think he does have it, even though I believe it's already been a book. I think some of the books put out some high numbers, and I think it was more protection. So it's like sharps are waiting for it to go up, but it's not going up as fast.
Right.
I'm okay with it if I can't middle this, Ron, but I would prefer taking like 93.5 back or something like that. We'll see the day of the Super Bowl if it changes. I'm okay with sitting on this thing, but I'm just going to let it chill for a minute. So I do disagree with your Brock Purdy one because I took over 11.5 rushing yards. Let's land on 12, baby. Let's land on 12, Ron. But
Okay.
I seen him rush the ball very well, and he's going to be nervous, and he's not going to want to throw a pick. He's going to take off. Mahomes was higher, and Mahomes is running the ball less than he used to, but I think Mahomes is probably going to run a lot too. It's just that I didn't want to go high in his rush. I remember last year, if you got the number early on his over, you were fine, but those knees he took it under the closing number. And I remember that being a big deal at the end of that Super Bowl run.
Yeah, well, one of these quarterbacks is probably going to have a couple of kneel downs. You just have to guess which one.
Right. What is Valdez-Scantling's number for receiving yards right now? I'll pull it up here.
15 and a half, 16 and a half. And it's funny because with him, I think this is going to sound weird, but the number for him is irrelevant compared to any other receiver because to me, he's either going to
it's 19 and
totally quit. I mean, he's going to go way up over that number because he's going to catch a deep ball or he's going to catch nothing.
I bet it. I took it at 16 and a half and it's at 19 and a half now. But I think that the books made a mistake on this. They still had like some props involving what's his face that criticized the Chiefs, played for Florida, the guy that would lined up off sides.
Tony.
Yeah, Kadarius Toney. So they kind of assumed he was still good, but Tony's toast. He's not playing. Yeah. I mean, he insulted the team, but the books are like putting 16 and a half on Valdez-Scantling. I'm like, okay, here's what the Niners did to Kelsey last Super Bowl. They blanketed him. It was guys like Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins that had 95 plus receiving yards. Kelsey had 6 receptions for under 50 yards. I think he was in the 40s or 30. I think it was in the 40s. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm waiting until Kelsey's prop goes up for the receiving, and I'm going to take the under on Saturday night. I think the sharper players might knock it down on Sunday. A lot of people say, wait till right till the game. No. I've missed numbers for sharp bets on these unders before. I'm a Saturday night unders guy, or early Sunday morning if you get up early enough, more than late Sunday, because they've already been hit by the sharper books and they're trying to middle at this point. So, and I think they know that too. Maybe they'll be on there on Saturday night. But anyways, I just think the fact that Tony's not playing, who you have, Justin Watson, that dude is not trustable. He drops a bunch of passes just like Scantling, except he's slower, So I think they're going to blanket Kelsey. I think it's just going to force the ball more to Valdez-Scantling. But you're right. There is a situation where you might not even get a catch, Ron.
Yeah, it could go either way. I think they're going to test San Francisco deep. Maybe I'm wrong on that. An unknown thing that's going on is Sky Moore might be activated for this game. And if you remember, Sky Moore was schemed open for a touchdown in last year's Super Bowl because Kansas City gets creative with 2 weeks to go, and they're going to run some plays that nobody has seen, and either they're going to work or they're not going to work. But Sky
might get a rushing attempt too. That would be great.
I was just going to say the same thing. Sky Moore could actually run the ball. There's upside with him if he could ever stay healthy. Now, probably he only steals about 10% of the snaps from Watson and from Scantling and anybody else. But there's a path for Sky Moore to do something, and therefore one less throw to some of these other guys. But I'm going to give a teaching moment out again. Let's give away the farm, okay? If you want to make a Scantling bet Scantling long reception over 13 and a half yards, but bet it at a place that if he does not have a reception, the play is voided. So there are 2 different types of books, and it's 50-50. Either a book all they have to do is must play and it's valid, or it says has to have a target or has to have a reception and it's valid. So read the fine line carefully. When you bet long passes over, long completions over, you get an extra benefit if the book voids it. And when you bet first reception, for example, under, make sure that they're not going to void it if there's no first reception. So you can play with the rules a little bit and have a little bit more advantage. And that's something I do a lot.
Oh, that's amazing. Now most of them are saying if you're playing the game, you can get a reception. If you're injured, you don't. That's what they mostly do. So, but yeah, there's probably some stuff out there if they don't get any reception. Yeah, I mean, that'd be kind of crazy. But it would be nice to have some of those mistakes. I mean, DraftKings just made a real big mistake about their 72 holes rule. They didn't have it out, and I saw this guy with a 20 guy parlay that was $20 to pay $750,000 because he just bet the top 20 to all finish in the top 20 and parlayed them together. And well, there you go. It was, I'm not sure if they have to pay it or not, because I think these books have too much power, and it seems like everybody favors them. I've looked at this stuff happening in Vegas, and they seem to always favor the books, even though it's complete BS, but I don't know. Niner Gang says, Niners have a league leading 22 interceptions this year. I think that was part of my handicap too. Now the Chiefs have been a lot better in the playoffs too, but I also think the Niners don't throw the picks. And Mahomes has thrown some picks this year. He's kind of gotten in trouble, but it's all about the offensive line. I think that with Vinovich there, it benefits the Chiefs a little bit. It could benefit the Niners if they're holding on to Chris Jones, but I think that the Chiefs in general had a better pass rush rate. They did. Their pass rush rate was better than the Niners, and that shocked me a little bit. I guess it was just because Young hasn't been that great. Bosa's been double teamed a lot, and Farrell's injured, and that worries me a little bit. Farrell being injured against the run, but I'm still leaning on that explosive Niners offense for Niner Gang there, so that's why I'm on their side. But there's just lots of intricacies in this game itself. And does Mahomes throw an interception? I don't know. Well, let's move on to the passing props here. Oh, one more. I had a receiving prop. I had I believe Isaiah Pacheco gets over 17.5 receiving yards. If you look, the Niners are eighth worst in allowing yards to running backs. They just let them catch the ball, let them get a few yards, don't let them destroy them. I think Pacheco's going to get a lot of those. And I think McKinnon's not going to play. I don't know why he's not showing on the injury report, but last I shown that he's still on IR. He's not playing. And he's probably not going to play from what I'm hearing. Have you heard anything on McKinnon?
No, I'm kind of waiting, because if he plays, it triggers a play that I want to make, and that would be Edwards-Helaire under for receptions or under for yards, because I think he would steal the third down thunder of Edwards-Helaire. That's what I'm waiting on.
Yeah, that's good. I'm hearing it's more doubtful. I know he was designated to return off IR, but here's another thing. Do you give your running back, a guy that's been out so long, a chance to fumble this ball? It's just like that thing. You're out of practice. That's why there's 20-day windows, So we'll see if he plays. If he does, then I'm really going to be on your bet too. Please text me, Ron, when you find that out. Or I'll text you if I found out first. So
that'd be great. That's what networking is all about.
That's what networking is all about. Exactly. Well, let's move on to the passing props then. I didn't bet any quarterback props minus the Purdy one. And when I say quarterback props, I guess I meant more passing. I thought about going over and then try going under, but I was like, you know what? I think these numbers were placed kind of high. These are, I believe it's going to be rushing. I'm probably, if anything, going under on these passing yards for these teams and for these quarterbacks, I'm trying to say, and I'm not going to go over. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of liability on Mahomes because I layered some parlays. That's one of the things I've learned this year, is that you can manipulate the lines and still get plus money in parlays. So I think Kansas City is going to be passing. Well, let me put it this way, Kiev. It doesn't matter if Kansas City's ahead or behind. They're still likely to throw a lot of passes. With San Francisco, if they're ahead, they're going to run the ball. So it's kind of a different formality there. So I manipulated Mahomes to be 33 and a half attempts rather than 36 and a half, and just put him with some other stuff. And so I'm not going to get plus 260 on a parlay. I'm going to get plus 110 or plus 125 or stuff like that. But that's kind of how I manipulated Mahomes.
Oh,
I
that's
don't have
interesting. So
him
you
throwing
box
an
them with some of your other plays. You box them. So you need that leg to hit, but yeah.
Yeah, like Kittle is 3.5, but I want him to be 3, not 3.5, because I think that half catch matters. So I layered him with Kittle, or I layered him with somebody else. So you're giving up, a lot of stuff to go down to like plus 110 or plus 115, but you're getting two really good numbers according to my handicapping. So that's what I'm doing with that. Mahomes threw 2 interceptions in the Super Bowl when they played San Francisco 4 years ago. So he's not immune from throwing interceptions. So I want to make that point out. The Purdy interception, which opened at minus 106 and minus 110, is now out of range, really. It's minus 130 to minus 150 at a lot of shops. But when these guys throw, they're going to be throwing to the listener, Niner, mentioned that the 49ers have 22 interceptions, so that bodes well for Mahomes throwing one. And Purdy's had some interception-worthy throws that were lucky that they weren't interceptions. And I like Kansas City's savviness on defense. So you could see turnovers with the quarterbacks.
Yeah, you absolutely could see turnovers. I totally agree. I'm not going to bet the turnover though for each of them because Mahomes have been so careful with the ball. I almost think he's kind of falling into Aaron Rodgers land. Aaron Rodgers would rather almost throw it away than take a chance because I don't want the turnover by my number. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he should be throwing turnovers if you're losing and trying to win a game. I wish there was better stats showing which turnovers are real. Meaning, if you're trying to come back in the game, you're down 21 points, and you throw 2 picks. I'm not gonna fault that. A first half turnover, I think I fault a lot more than a second half turnover if you're behind. If it was just a stupid play and it's tied and you do it, I would fault you. But if you're chasing and you're trying to win the game because you are down and there is no time left or not enough time left, 5 minutes left, I'm okay with throwing a pick if you have to. So I wish there was better stats for next year. Maybe some of the big stat companies can figure that out a little bit more. It takes too much time for me to do it,
Ron. Yeah, you'd have to go back and see what happened on the last play of the first half. Was there an interception? Because what do you lose if there's 3 seconds left?
You have to do some sort of a function. If they were score +8 or more equals, then turnover equals this category. Yeah, it'd be some programming to do that. One of my off-season challenges is digging more into Python. I'm pretty good at spreadsheets already, and I have algorithms, but I want to get a little bit better with Python. I've always had somebody helping me that I paid to do that work for me. So move on to defensive props. So I got one. I think Bosa gets a sack. It could be a quarter sack. It don't matter. It's how FanDuel has it lined up. I laid minus 111. This is a lot higher in some books. I'm just doing a half unit on it. And I like Fred Warner tackles plus assists over 7.5 at minus 145 for 1 star. Now, Ron, the Fred Warner one is a no-brainer because I truly believe there's going to be a lot of running and a lot of stuff in the middle of this game. Fred Warner's all over the field. He's their best player on defense. There's going to be plenty of handoffs to there's going to be plenty of tight end tackles too. I just see Fred Warner getting there, and the Bosa one I'm not as confident about, but if it plays out where the Niners are winning, he can get to Mahomes. Might get a PI call or a personal foul call too, but we'll see how that goes. Oh God, please, Vinovich, do that.
Yeah, Mahomes is going to do some scrambling, and whether he ends up running or ends up throwing a pass, Bosa's fast enough that he can get there and possibly get that particular sack. So certainly no problem with that play. Jair Brown is my person. I'm going to be looking more at tackles and assists, and I understand. Warner is a guy who's always around the ball, just like you said. So I think we're going to see some variations in tackles and assists book by book when we get closer to kickoff. I haven't looked at them yet because they're all cloning each other right now. There's
They
very
are.
little difference going on.
Well,
You
it was
see
eight
some,
and a half at plus money, and I was like, I'm not taking that. And then they moved it to 7.5 for minus money. I'm like, oh, I'll take that. I think that 8 is such a key sack number or
yeah.
tackle number. So don't do 8.5.
Yeah, and different players come into play depending on if it's a run-centric game versus a pass-centric game. And that's something the books don't always factor in. But sometimes you get that from more people are sharp at this, that they're doing props more than ever. It's not just recreational props for the Super Bowl. I'm not sure why. I just like the value. You can get anywhere from plus 140 to plus 155, but I have San Francisco with the first defensive sack as opposed to Kansas City. Even if you think Kansas City might get a little bit more in terms of sacks, they're both priced at about 2.5. But I just think you're getting some value when you get plus 140 or plus 150 or plus 155 with San Francisco first defensive sack. So I put a little bit on that. Books
Okay.
don't usually. Yeah, another thing with sacks is it's hard to find whole numbers anymore. This is part of the prop betting that I absolutely hate now, that you can't have a receiver with 3 receptions or 4 receptions or 5. It always has to be 3.5 or 4.5 or 5.5. I have a pet peeve about that I'm not, we don't have enough time to go into that. But there were a few books that started off with under and over 5 sacks. Now, 5.5 was available. Originally, you could have gone under 5.5 sacks for about minus 165. Now it's about minus 200 or so. But I ended up doing minus 5 under for minus 105. I thought that was better value for me to do the minus 105 at 5. And you can even find some 4s and 4.5s out there now. So I hedged some of the risk because you can get plus money on 4.5 or no juice really at 4. But more of my play is going to be under 5 because I like that number for sacks.
Under 5 sacks or under
5 sacks total.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Mahomes gets rid of the ball, and he's hard to sack. I think he's going to be caught a couple times, but I don't think it's going to be a ton of times. I think Purdy, just with his scheme, I should look again at these yards I did last week at your time to throw. I usually look at that, but I'm pretty sure Purdy is pretty quick to get rid of the ball, like Trevor Lawrence and other quarterbacks. So I'll double check that in the mail. I'll check that while we go to the next category. MVP props. Do you like anything for MVP, Ron?
I can make a case for McCaffrey if San Francisco wins, because McCaffrey's got such a buzz for being the most important player on the team. Perhaps Deebo Samuel, but Deebo would have to do more than just receiving. He'd have to have a bang-up rushing day too. McCaffrey, we know, can do both. So I think if you want McCaffrey, or if you want to go non-quarterback, which is anywhere from plus 215 to plus 250, I could see where that would come into play. But otherwise, I generally don't go into MVP props.
Okay, so for me, I do it as a fun bet. This is not a serious one, so I'll do that. I'll cover what I did, and I went Deebo right away at 30. I don't think that number is available no more. 38-1 plus 3,800.
Big number, good number.
Thanks. Yeah, I got it early. I just thought that another way they would win this game is because Deebo runs out of the slot and he comes out of many areas. He's going to have 2 or 3, maybe 4 rushing attempts. Some of those break for massive chunks of yards. Deebo's the hard guy to tackle. It's going to be a lot harder for Snead to tackle Deebo than he did against little Trey Flowers last week, or week and a half ago, I should say. Deebo's a beast. He's an absolute beast. He could be the game changer. Niners lost every game when Deebo was out. He's playing this game. Like you said, I think he's 90%. He was way healthier last week than I expected to.
Me too.
I was shocked to see him play so well. But his shoulder's probably going to be taped up and maybe a little injection in there and get him going. And I think there's definitely an opening where he can get it. But I also had I mean, that's the one I'm hoping for, but I put a small one on George Kittle at 75-1. I actually don't like that one anymore. I think that I'm going to go under Kittle's props too for not receptions, but total yards. Kansas City's the number 3 team against tight ends this year when it comes to allowing yards. So I always like to look at my fantasy stats too, because I think that's very important when you start tight ends against certain defenses. You want to see who allows yards or touchdowns. Well, Kansas City's just happen to be very good against tight ends. So maybe it's Willie Gay. I don't know who's covering them at all times, but it shifts between linebackers and corners depending upon formation and things like that, even safeties, Ron. But that's all Spagnuolo stuff. I don't have to worry about it. I just know the results, my man. Brock Purdy, I put in as a save bet too at plus 245. I got a good number on Brock Purdy, MVP at plus 245, and a quarter unit on McCaffrey at plus 480. Now, if Kansas City wins, obviously I lose all those bets. So I had to throw another quarter unit on Pacheco at 35-1. Now that's probably not going to happen because you saw Damian Williams make 3 touchdowns in that last Super Bowl and against the Niners, and they gave it to Mahomes. The problem with sports journalists is they don't know. They know how to write about feelings and narratives and things that happen, and they can kind of regurgitate people that are injured and not like that, but they know nothing about the ins and outs of football. They couldn't pick a game for nothing. You see all the mistakes they make picking games. They don't know and so they'll bet. They'll just pick Mahomes, even though he might be the last guy that did it for the Chiefs. They could have 3 defensive touchdowns. I'm hoping it's not like that, but I figure I have to have some sort of out. So I think that if the Chiefs are winning by 2 touchdowns and then Pacheco is part of that 2 touchdowns lead, they're going to be running the ball to Pacheco and killing the clock. So that's my angle on it. But the truth is, Chiefs win this game. I'm probably losing my MVP bets, Ron.
Yeah, it's very subjective, the MVP, and we try to make our informed decisions on more objective measures. So that's why it's pizza money.
Yeah, absolutely. It's small bets. Okay, so any cross sport props that you did?
Well, I'm waiting for some still because they're not really coming out with those soccer props. I not preface this by saying I do not know a thing about soccer. So let me start with that. However, I know how to read lines, and I usually find between 2 to 5 soccer lines that are mispriced because of something or another. Maybe they copied and pasted wrong or something like that. So I'm usually able to find some cross sport prop late in the game, Friday, Saturday night, and then you know what you have before the kickoff of the Super Bowl. So I had 2 that were sent to me, and one of which was Rams score plus 6.5 against San Francisco total touchdown yards. So, I mean, the assumption would be if you take Rom is that San Francisco is not going to have 40-yard breakaway touchdowns or return a kick or a punt or something like that, that most of their touchdowns are going to be McCaffrey short or they're going to get somebody open and not in space. But that was an interesting one. And then I had another one, number of offensive plays in the game, which is typically in the 120s. I think it's -1 versus the New Orleans points in the NBA.
Oh.
So I don't know where it was because it was just sent to me. What do you think about this? Do you want to go partners on it? And I said, sure, let's do it. I don't know, that NBA team score 120 something points. Maybe they do. I didn't check the matchup. But it sounded reasonable to me. So I like cross-sport props, but I haven't made many yet because they're not out for me yet.
I haven't done many yet either. I'm waiting for more college basketball ones. I don't know a lot about golf. I got some golf guys I can go to. Patrick Gates, a guy on our site that's just been amazing. And some of the, obviously Brady Cannon, some golf friends of mine that are very good at betting golf. But I think that I'm going to wait a little bit on that too. As a matter of fact, what's interesting, Ron? If you have like the DraftKings and stuff like that, there's a ton of like fun games that they do for free. And like Toyota will sponsor one where you win $5,000. You just got to fill out these yes, no questions. And it's just like a massive parlay, right? But you got to be the closest one to being right, at least if you're not all right. And then you win $5,000. You know, there's all kinds of stuff. You can just, if you got an hour, just do some of that stuff, try to for some money and see how it comes. You know, I made a non-serious $10 parlay bet. I think I went Niners to win, touchdown by Isaiah and CMC, Debo rush yards over 17.5, Noah Gray over 11.5 receiving yards, which I kind of like that one too. I forgot to mention I like Noah Gray here. I think Kelsey's blanketed, and I think you mentioned you did too. Chiefs score first and Chiefs team total under 20.5. It pays 50 to 1, so I'll get $500 for more beer that I maybe I can buy a couple half barrels if that goes well for me, some dark beer, and so you can come over and enjoy it with me.
Oh,
so
good.
so
Always thinking of your friends.
That's right. I know Ron loves the dark beers, man. Oh yeah, that's good stuff. You know what? So here's a prop I can't find, and I want to find it because I really correlates to the ref. I want total flags or accepted penalties. I want to go under on it. I don't think that refs in general like throw a lot of penalties in the Super Bowl, and unless it's the very end where it's been happening all game. But Vinovich is like that, and I can't find total flags or total accepted penalties. I looked on DraftKings, FanDuel, and there's nothing popping up yet. I'm waiting for it, Ron. So if you find it, let me know. I'll go halves with you, or maybe you can get down for me. But
it is out there, but it's hard to find.
Okay.
The 10.5 is a number of penalties, and I've seen anywhere from minus 105 to minus 130 on the under. Mm-hmm. So it's out there. But I was going to ask you something very similar to that. I like to bet which team will have the most penalties, not the most penalty yards, but the most penalties. And I have not seen that anywhere this year. And I really want it because I think it's kind of funny how I handicapped this. In terms of pass interference, I think maybe San Francisco might have more problems with that. But in terms of
penalty yards would be great for that, though.
Penalty yards.
Yeah.
But in terms of most penalties, I think Kansas City, we've seen it so many times. If there's going to be holding, it's going to be Kansas City. And if there's going to be offsides, it's going to be Kansas City because they're famous for going offsides. In one Super Bowl, they went offsides 4 or 5 times, I think it was. I really want to find somewhere. So if you see it, or if anybody who listens to this sees it and wants to DM either one of us, team with the most penalties is something I'm looking for.
Yeah, I see for a team to commit first accepted penalty. I see will there be a penalty for excessive celebration? Will there be an offensive pass interference? That's the one I was thinking about. I'm like, well, if there's a team that's dominating and the refs want to kind of slow the game down on their side to keep it closer, maybe Vinovich calls an offensive pass interference. Both of these offensive coordinators are going to run schemes and pick plays probably, and there's some pick plays didn't get called, as you saw last week during the playoffs. I'm just wondering if they're actually going to call an offensive pass interference. So it's plus 375, and
that's a good number.
I think it's a pretty good number to the yes. You know, I would have probably said plus 300 was right, which is 25% chance of it. But I think there's more than a 25% chance of it. So maybe that's one we make plus 375 for a little bit, you know, quarter unit, half unit or something like that. But the other one is, will there be a penalty for taunting? You know, because I believe the Ravens got one last week. So maybe people would bet that yes at plus 750. I mean, no, I don't think they're going to call a taunting penalty in the Super Bowl. I hope not anyway.
I got one, want your thought on this one. I did it already. Not big, of course, but, you know, tempers flare in the Super Bowl a lot. And offsetting penalties, which started at yes for offsetting penalties plus 150, is now actually up to plus 165. So they're betting the no, there won't be offsetting penalties. But you know, when they can't decide, sometimes they don't want to flag the first guy or the second guy. I think I don't know. I don't have stats on it. I didn't dig into it, but I would say this would be I would have priced this more like at a plus 115 instead of a plus 150 or plus
On the yes,
165 now.
on the yes for
So
offsetting
I
penalties.
went yes, offsetting penalties.
Oh yeah, I mean it's the biggest game. They're trying to win. They'll get all fired up at some point probably. Offsetting
Might have to
penalties.
wait till 1 minute to go in the game to have it happen, but we'll see.
That's true. I mean that'd be like that ticket with Valdez Scantling I had last week. His receiving yards went way over after that. It went from 6 to like 36.
Yeah, right.
And the number was like 16 and a half, the same number as I took for this game. But yeah, I mean, I will let you know if I find it. So you let me know on the total penalties where it is, and I'll let you know if I can find any more offsettings. I got quite a few outs, but I'm not seeing a lot of penalty props except for a few offshores, Ron. I'm not seeing.
I know. Yeah,
I'm also limited differently in DraftKings. Like DraftKings is bad in Connecticut, but there's places where DraftKings has more stuff than I have. That's true. So
I have shops that have limited me to $1 for certain props. So that won't even pay for a taste of dark beers. So
that doesn't even pay for your click on the mouse for pushing it.
I know. Yeah, I'm expanding energy.
Geez, I mean, yeah, I mean, your time is money. I mean, way over $1 a click. Come on here, right? Well, great stuff, man. What a wonderful breakdown of these games. I find it so fascinating. All the disagreement on the side, but you and I are almost completely tight on the props, -1 disagreement with Purdy. So it's going to be just a gentleman's bet with Purdy, and if it lands on 12, we both win. So we'll just root for that this coming week. But my man, really enjoy this run. Love talking to you. We're going to have you on in the off season as well. Where could our listeners get your great information and plays?
First of all, always a pleasure talking to you, and to everybody listening. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Bet responsibly. I can be found on Twitter at down below at Ron A Sports. There are articles that I've written for Wager Talk, but probably with the football off season, I'm football only. But I do plan to, from time to time, resurface during the draft, talking about all the coordinator changes, maybe delving into some college football stuff. So every once in a while, you might still see me hop in and talk NFL or NCAA.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what's great about it is that it keeps going on and these lines are out earlier and earlier. So always be following Ron on Twitter. You know, he has some great updates for some of that stuff and some just amazing articles that he's written on our site, on Kyle Hunter's, on Wager Talk. Ron's just a fantastic journalist as well. And so I love reading Ron's stuff. You want something in depth and something that's going to explain everything to you, definitely read Ron's stuff. Ron, we'll be texting, man. Best of luck for the Super Bowl.
Thank you.